Yeah, I think I have to. Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about it. Paddle here. I'm just... No, I'm the town attorney.
Well, no, I just let them, I just go like this.
I think we're around town hall. So I'm the... Gotten any message? I haven't gotten any message. I'm sorry. That would be... I've talked to him several times today, and I Okay. I've talked to him several times today. He hasn't. What was the question about? Those, I can answer your question. Process, that's why I'm here.
Okay, we will begin with the 5:30 public hearing. This is a substitute ordinance, the Town of West Hartford designating intersections to be regulated against blockage under CGS Section 14 through 2250BA. We will start with a roll call, Ms. LeBrun.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge is absent. Ms. Fay is absent. Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd.
Here.
And Mr. Williams is absent.
Thank you, Ms. LeBrun. Do we have a presentation? Oh, Mr. Hart.
We do, Mayor. Thank you. This is what we see as an important measure designed to promote traffic safety. We recently reviewed it at the committee level, and our town engineer, Dwayne Martin, is here to make a brief presentation to the council and to the public.
Good evening, everybody. Dwayne Martin, West Hartford Town Engineer. So we have before you tonight an ordinance which we're referring to as, or in the office at least, as do not block the box. So essentially it's a traffic control measure that's done at busy intersections or driveways where traffic tends to block the intersection or driveway and cause an unsafe situation where motorists may unfortunately make a sudden or an unexpected maneuver, which then leads to a crash. So there are measures that can be put in place. We have them in town in a few locations, which essentially are signage and pavement markings to give the message to motorists to not occupy that space if they are intending to stop, and that it keeps that open for motorists to cross, whether they're entering or exiting a driveway or an intersection. There are also signs that would be placed adjacent to these pavement markings, which would further indicate essentially do not block the intersection, subject to fine. We have 4 locations in town, and they are, I believe they're listed on the ordinance, but I'll go through them. So New Park Avenue at the CT Fast Track driveway, which was one that the state DOT approached me with just to get a little bit safer maneuver in and out of their access there to that CT Fast Track station, what we refer to as the Flatbush station. Farmington Avenue at 4 North Main Street, 4 North Main Street being the Bank of America. They have an exit onto Farmington Ave, and that has been a high crash location, so the improvement was made there some time ago. Raymond Road at the Police and Fire exit, which was requested by the Police and Fire to get them easier access out to respond to emergencies. And then the last location, which is one that's fairly new, which is Farmington Ave. Technically, Route 4 is state highway at that location at the intersection with Everett Avenue. I have a handout which demonstrates that, if we can just pass that along. Just to give you an idea of what I'm referring to. So that's an aerial photograph of the Farmington at Everett intersection. And it shows you the proposed pavement markings. You can see there's a white outlined area of paint, which then has diagonal white crossings to indicate not to stop in that location. And it's positioned on Farmington Ave in the eastbound direction so that the motorists that are stopped at the traffic signal on Farmington Ave approaching Boulevard and Old Mill Lane do not back up and block Everett. We're also creating a left turn lane there for those residents to have access to Everett Avenue at the same time. And then, as I mentioned, there'll be signs posted alongside the location where those markings will be to identify to do not block intersections subject to fines. The reason we're going the extra measure of the ordinance is because we are supposed to identify to the state where we have these locations. So if we add any in the future, we need to update the list by way of the ordinance. It specifically requires the locations to be listed in the ordinance. And by way of having the ordinance, then the police can then administer fines as needed for any safety issues that occur at those locations.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Is it consistent that all of the intersections have that hashtaggy kind of?
Yes, I believe that there is only one location where the paint actually extends in both directions, and that's the one on Raymond Road at the police and fire exit. They ask that it go across both directions, but all the others are just in one direction, usually because they're adjacent to a traffic signal where the traffic backs up in that one direction. The idea is to be uniform with the markings and the signage. So the locations have signage out there, but the messages are mixed depending on the location. So we're going to replace those all with a standardized message.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Martin or Mr. Sweeney?
So just on the Farmington Avenue, North Main Street, logistically, how is that going? I mean, that's a five-way intersection, six-way, right? How would you enforce that? Like, where would you put a police officer?
Well, the markings and the driveway are set away from or to the east of the big intersection of Farmington and Main. So the markings are there. They're in the westbound direction. So as you're approaching Main Street, say coming from Tropic Drive, you're going up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
And so a police officer could be staged somewhere nearby across the street or perhaps in the parking lot for the Bank of America. I don't think that they'll do that. I think a lot of these are intended just to give the motorist the message, and then should an incident occur, they should have known better. Now you can administer a fine. Hopefully they don't do it again.
But I mean, that intersection is just basically backed up no matter what.
Right.
I mean, I just enforcing something that intersection is not designed. I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's fit for the amount of traffic that goes through it. Therefore, like by instituting a fine or no, don't block the box here, I mean, I guess in regards to, it's just the way it's made up doesn't seem like it's going to be something that is going to be other than frustrating, or it doesn't seem very enforceable. So therefore, I'm not really sure of the point of it, because if you're going west on Farmington Avenue through the center, the light is at the very top of that hill, right? But you can't get. I mean, if you have that traffic stopping right there, I mean, you have 4 or 5 cars that go into the intersection at that point to go left onto Main Street. I mean, you're talking about significant traffic backups just if you strictly enforce that. I mean, I guess that's where the strict interpretation of that could cause. It would seem like a significant backups in all directions, just because of generally the flow of that intersection is terrible. I mean, if you look at it right now, it's horrendous. I was just coming up from it, and you can see the backup from that intersection all the way at the bottom at Trout Brook. So, I mean, I guess that's where I would.
Well, to be clear, the intent of that location is not in the intersection of Farmington and Main.
Mm.
You know, sometimes cars do get hung up when they're trying to make a left. That's not the
It's just
location
right
we're
in front
talking
of-
about.
right.
This is in advance of that.
Yeah.
The bank has an exit, and a lot of people were trying to have access to Farmington Avenue. It was causing crashes.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes what happens on a multi-lane road like that is the motorist that stops in the curbside lane sees the motorist trying to exit, and they'll wave him into traffic.
Yeah.
And they don't see the other car coming up in the
Right,
adjacent lane, and then it causes a crash. So that was what was occurring there. So it essentially occupies about a 15-foot long box area.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it. I'm just saying in regards to that just general intersection blocking a space going into another area that's just overwhelmed with traffic overall, just seems, I don't know, it is complete chaos there in the rush hour, or if it's Saturday morning around 10 or 11. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, oftentimes where these are located is very busy intersections, just that they go hand in hand. That's the reason why the crashes occur, and they end up installing measures like this to try and prevent awareness, promote awareness to prevent crashes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Barnes?
Just following up on that, is the box that we're talking about on Farmington, does that cover both lanes, or is that just the first lane?
It's both westbound travel lanes.
And is it designed to allow for, a left and a right exit out of the bank parking lot?
It is. It's set up that way just to try not to discern between the two, but I think the benefit is more so for the left-turning vehicle, which is challenged more so than the right-turning vehicle out of that driveway.
Sure, sure. And they're going to be looking right to see what's coming before going out into traffic, and there's the potential of actually getting stuck in that box. I mean, I think of, the box. You think about it like New York City style, where it's actually the heart of the intersection, where you're waiting to see if you can go through that intersection. If the light changes, you wait and don't get stuck in the middle. This is kind of a different variety of, trying to, ease congestion there, but it seems like it may be creating just different problems having it there.
I don't know that it's been a problem per se. I haven't heard complaints about it. What I've seen is mixed results. Sometimes motorists will do exactly as we want them to and leave an opening there if they see an exiting motorist. Other times they just disregard it, in which case the person trying to exit the bank just has to wait longer
Right.
to make that left turn. I have seen what happens is if people stop and don't block the box, the exiting motorist will pull into the travel lanes and take advantage of that. Usually there's a gap because the intersection, as was described, is pretty busy and provides some maneuvers, usually because of the pedestrian phase there. Coming up so frequently and taking so much time, it allows that gap in that traffic because there's no turn on red at the intersection. So usually there's an availability for them to sneak out.
Okay. And just one other question. If there is a fine or a ticket that's imposed, do we know, how much the ticket would be?
$117.
First offense?
Any offense.
100.
It's actually set, to be clear, it's set by the state, not by us. The violation is an infraction. Once we designate the locations, it's actually the locations identify where the violation takes place, but it's a state statute violation. And the state sets the infraction schedule, and this one is 117.
Wow. I don't remember exactly how this works, but are there points involved? Can you get points for this type of infraction?
I didn't check that. Let me see if I can find out. Hang on.
I thought you were going to tell me it was $25, like a parking ticket.
Yeah,
but 117 is substantial, and it makes me wonder about, what we're going to do in terms of, community outreach and let people know that because the box has been there, it's been there for a while, that we're actually now going to, start enforcing it, or the police are going to start enforcing it, to let people know how significant that is. That's a lot of money.
One more question.
Mr. Sweeney?
Has there been thought about making that a right-only turn there?
Well, there's two lanes there, and the parking lot can get kind of tight. So if you only had the one lane, it would stage in their site quite a bit.
I mean, to Mr. Barnes's point, and I frequent that area. If you're pulling out and it's two cars deep, you can't see left. You have to essentially be in the eastward bound lane to be turning left to just poke out, because at that time you just can't see it. And whenever I've gone to that lot, I always come back the other way where you're close to the light and you can see the traffic and you're not really worried about being parked out. But I don't know if it's something that it might be considered looking at, is just making that a right turn only. Because I know it's really difficult to get into that back lot, and I also know that the other access point to that is on North Main Street, but I think the two properties don't agree on access to the back there, right? I think because if people were cutting through it or something like that.
I do, again, let me know if the ordinance is, this is, I think we're talking about two issues. I think one, we're talking about taking a left turn lane out of that really isn't this particular issue. This is identifying intersections where you don't, on that same side of the street, right? That's what we would be voting on. And this, I think, is another important, but not necessarily, specific to this naming of this particular intersection on turning right or left, but that block has always been there, so we have to list it as, if we want to continue.
My division gets traffic complaints all the time, as does the police department, so we can certainly look into it.
In the accidents though, are the accidents on people turning right or are they on people turning left?
It was left.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I mean, I don't know.
But
The
but
point
that
I'm
was
making is
before,
that you're not going to get hit
that
turning right.
was before the pavement markings and the signage were there, so we can revisit and see.
Yeah, I think, I mean, to the mayor's point, that's not what's currently before us, but I also think that we wouldn't be having this conversation in a blocking box if it was only a right-hand turn. And it would totally slow down, you could speed up that process where if you can't go left there, the same, you'd be looking at the same sort of fines or whatever if you're looking at enforcement, but it's chaos to see someone turn left there. You pray for them when they're turning left there, because it's nuts.
Any other? Ms. Kerrigan?
A quick question, and I'm not a big fan of signs, because I go back to that song, Sign, Sign Everywhere, Sign, but, and I'm certainly dating myself, because many of you probably don't know it, but when do we decide to put a sign that says what the penalty will be for an infraction?
Well, in this case, the sign, I don't know if you saw it on that printout, it basically just says subject to fine. It doesn't list the fine, and I
Okay.
think the reason for that is because it could change.
Yeah.
And then we'd have to replace the signs. I don't know if we have signage that has a fine listed on it. I'm trying to think, and none are coming to mind. I don't know if it's for that reason or not. It could be.
I can't think of any.
I can't either.
A three-figure fine. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Barnes?
Yes, just to finish that thought about the fine and whether there are points involved, because it's substantial, the amount of the fine, maybe we would consider doing something like once we put the signs up and kind of had the equivalent of like a soft rollout, so to speak, so that people could get, adjusted to it, the signs, see how everyone's reacting to it before, having the police actually issue tickets for that offense, to give everyone an opportunity to
Mr. Hart?
get up to speed, so
Yeah,
to speak.
we could certainly do something of a communications campaign on this and issue warnings for a first offense and pick it up over time.
And as far as
I
the
think that'd be a
points
good
go,
idea.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
As far as the points go, I'm not seeing it on the list of points-related offenses. Understand that in Connecticut, DMV establishes the points that are assessed against the driver's license. The Superior Court establishes the fines, the infraction schedule, so they're in two different places. The infraction schedule is easy to find. The point system, it took me a little bit longer, but it doesn't appear to be on the list.
Okay. Yeah, and just as long as we can, if we're going to get the word out, if there are points involved,
Sure.
to make people aware of that as well. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. And just to be clear, the penalty, the fine, the money goes to the state, correct?
Yes.
Just put that on the record. Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Davidoff?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just as a, just as a comment from like 1,000 feet away, the intent here is to make certain that there's safe access for emergency vehicles to get, with respect to the police station, out of the police station, with respect to CT Fast Track, to be able to access that area safely in an emergency situation. The emphasis and the intent is not for us to place police officers at these four places to try to get you for $117. That's, our police are very busy throughout the town, and that's not what the intent is here. The intent is basically to improve pedestrian, bicycle, and car safety. And should there be situations where those are being impacted quite negatively on a routine basis, then I think we would see enforcement action take place. And I think that's what was discussed at committee. So I just wanted to just bring it down just a notch in terms of that, because I think that's what we talked about when we met upstairs in room 400, that when the chief mentioned this, that this is the four spots that he identified that could be problematic, but the intent was not to have someone there waiting for a violator. And I think that's important to also get into the record here. And I do think what the other comments that my colleague said are quite germane to the ordinance as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Sweeney, your mic is on. I don't know if you.
Oh, nope.
Okay. All right. Anything further? Okay. Is there a sign-up sheet from the?
Thank you.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to this public hearing, which is the ordinance of the designating intersections to be regulated? Okay, if you would like to state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes to speak unless you're representing a group, you can, if you would like to speak to this public hearing. Anybody? Okay. All right.
This gentleman right here.
Okay. No, speak into the mic. It will be, wait, Mr. O'Leary. Okay, thank you.
Yes, my name is initials LB, last name Lewis. I'm here actually to speak to the next item on the agenda, but in listening to the discussion on this, I have to ask myself, why are patrons of the bank being valued higher than ordinary citizens of West Hartford? I mean, there's no reason that they have to be able to make a left turn, which causes a possible safety hazard, other than the convenience of the customers of the bank. It's ridiculous. I don't understand why we're here discussing it. It shouldn't even been on the table.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Is there anybody else? Okay. With that, we will close this public hearing. Next public hearing that was scheduled for 5:40 is the application of West Hartford Fellowship Housing, leasee of 1060 Starkel Road, to amend SDD number 87 to permit the redevelopment of the existing 213-unit affordable housing complex. The proposed redevelopment contemplates the demolition of all of the existing buildings, except for the building at 60 Starkel Road, and the construction of 6 new residential buildings, a new maintenance building, renovations to the 60 Starkel Road building, and associated parking facilities, site lighting, landscaping, recreational, pedestrian, and site improvements. A total of 308 age-restricted and accessible units is proposed under the redevelopment. The applicant has also requested a waiver of the required fees pursuant to Section 177-50M. Roll call, Ms. Lebrow.
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff is recusing himself. Mr. Dodge is absent. Ms. Fay is absent. Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd. Mr. Williams is absent. We have Ms. Farrar sitting in for Mr. Davidoff.
Here. Thank you, Ms. Farrar, for stepping in and filling in for us. This public hearing will be continued to August 13th, 2019 at 5:30 in the Legislative Chamber. Mr. Hart, can you address why that is the case? There are people here, I think, that came to speak to this, so I want to explain.
Yes, a couple of key reasons. Number one, the applicant, they need some additional time to refine the application. Staff has been reviewing it. Also, we have a design review advisory committee that serves the town. They're reviewing the application. They've noted some key issues for concern. So the applicant, we reached out to them and thought that the August date would work best for a full presentation and to conduct a public hearing.
And just to, and Mr. Allaire, you can comment on this, we have not done a presentation, so we don't know what that plan is. So to accept public comment based on, without a presentation would not really be appropriate.
That's correct. The normal process, as you all well know, but the public may not, is the applicant submits the plans, makes a presentation to the council then asks questions, which may actually help to answer some questions that the members of the public have. Then the public comment period takes place, And then following that, the applicant is allowed to close and respond to any of those comments. So until the application is heard and you've had your chance to see the plans and ask questions, there's not really an appropriate point now for the public to comment.
I hope that is clear, and we will accept emails and any concerns you might have, but again, much more helpful after the actual application and the plan is presented to the council and the public. So, and with that, I will close the public hearing. Continue the public hearing. Ooh, good thing. Okay. And we will recess until 6:30 when the town council will begin. Okay, we will start, or we will call our July 16th council meeting to order, and we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. LeBeau?
Mr. Barnes.
Present.
Ms. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Davidoff.
Here.
Mr. Dodge is absent. Ms. Fay is absent. Ms. Kerrigan. Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Winograd. And Mr. Williams is absent.
Thank you, Ms. LeBeau. I would like to, actually, at first I'm going to start with just a comment on, we lost the West Hartford family lost a remarkable woman yesterday. Actually, she died July 9th, I'm sorry. This is Mims Butterworth. Her picture is on the wall. She was a historian, educator, activist, and parent of 4. She was a remarkable woman ahead of her time. Brave and strong. She was a humanitarian and a real fighter for social causes. She traveled the globe, had the support of her family in a time when she was born in 1918. And imagine the courage and the strength. She was in Germany in 1938. What she saw there, she was in the 1995 World Conference on Women in China. And she also served as a commissioner for what is now Pura, or something similar to that. It was a little different. She leaves, again, her 4 children and her 9 grandchildren and her 13 great-grandchildren. And they also mentioned in the obituary 2 former exchange students as well that became part of their family. So we are thinking of her on this special day. I was so privileged to meet her a couple of times and to deliver a proclamation on her 100th birthday. And we thank her for, we thank her family for giving her to us, too, for her service to the town of West Hartford and also to the state of Connecticut. And then with that, I'd like to make a motion to suspend the rules to deliver a proclamation. Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Hi there. So we just had a little celebration, and it's going to be, we're going to send you out probably inadequately because of all you've given to this town. And it has been such an honor and a pleasure to work with you, to know your family. You are a true, honest public servant, and you always have had the best interests of the community at heart. And I am so grateful for your many, many, many years of service. And he looks young. He still looks like he still could be serving, right? But we're going to continue to stay in touch and send your goodbyes. Don't be too much of a pest as a citizen. He's got way too much knowledge, so we're really a little worried about all that. But we're really, really, really grateful. And your kids have already said you need to, and your wife need to find something to do in a couple months. So you're going to enjoy the summer, and then you're going to. And we've got things if you need any ideas. So, whereas the health and vitality of a community is reflected in the participation of its citizens in those activities that further the strength of the town, and whereas Assistant Chief Robert T. McHugh will retire from town service on July 17, 2019, and whereas Assistant Chief Robert T. McHugh was hired by the West Hartford Police Department on July 17, 1980, and appointed Assistant Chief on June 2, 1996, and whereas Assistant Chief Robert T. McHugh has served the citizens of West Hartford for 39 years with dedication, honor, and distinction. And whereas Assistant Chief Robert T. McHugh focused his leadership on collaborating and maintaining ties with the West Hartford community and facilitated the annual coordination, I need new glasses, I apologize, of numerous town services, and chaired Police Department Commendation Committee, coordinated the annual police awards ceremony, and whereas Assistant Chief Robert T. McHugh is a graduate of the FBI National Academy, has received several dozen letters of commendation, and the Distinguished Service Medal for his actions engaged an armed suspect attempting to shoot at a fellow officer. And whereas Assistant Chief Robert T. McHugh balanced the needs of the community, the needs of the town, and those of his officers in a caring and passionate manner, spearheading several dozen department programs and initiatives. And now, therefore, be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council of West Hartford and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby extend sincere appreciation to Assistant Chief Robert T. McHugh for his commitment to the town of West Hartford, and proclaim July 16th, 2019 as Robert T. McHugh Day in West Hartford. So party on.
Thank you very much.
Wait. You hold this.
Okay.
And I also want to give a special thank you for a police officer. It is their family that also makes all of this possible. So thank you to all of your family that is there behind you and beside you. Thank you so much. And I want to recognize our police chief and our police chief Riddick and our assistant police chief Dan Coppinger as well. So thank you so much for being here. All right. Thank you so much. You want to say a few words?
No, I just want to say thank you. This is a really great honor. You have a great police department full of great men and women. Part of that success comes from the town council support that you've always shown it, the town manager's support, and Mr. Allaire keeping us out of trouble. So, they say that I'm told that when you retire, you don't miss the place, you'll miss the people. You're certainly a group that I'm going to miss. So, thank you for your service. Thank you very much. Thanks. Thanks.
It really does feel completely inadequate, but thank you. Okay, now I've lost my place. Okay, number 2A, Ms. Kerrigan. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're not staying?
Good night. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move approval of the Town Council minutes, June 25th, 2019, the public hearing application 527 Prospect Ave, June 11, 2019, and the public hearing ordinance permitting cottage food operations in resident districts, June 11, 2019.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Public forum, there's nobody here, so, I mean, you all are very important and wonderful
There's
people.
nobody.
But not public people.
Oh.
And it's, oh, right, that was an attendance probably from the sort of other, okay. Number 4, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we place items 11A through C and 12A through B on consent.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. 5A, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we table for August 13, 2019 at 5:30 an application of the West Hartford Fellowship Housing leases of 1060 Starkel Road to amend SDD number 87 to permit the redevelopment of the existing 213-unit affordable housing complex. The proposed redevelopment contemplates the demolition of all the existing buildings except for the building at 60 Starkel Road and the construction of 6 new residential buildings, a new maintenance building, renovations to the 60 Starkel Road building, and associated parking facilities, site lighting, landscaping, recreational, pedestrian, and site improvements. A total of 308 age-restricted and accessible units is proposed under the redevelopment, and the applicant has requested a waiver of the required fees pursuant to Section 177-50M.
All those in favor?
Right?
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries.
Abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Davidoff. 5B, Ms. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move we adopt a substitute ordinance of the town of West Hartford designating intersections to be regulated against blockage under CGS 14-250B.
Second.
This was the subject of a public hearing. Mr. Hart, would you like to do a quick summary of what this is?
I would be happy to. Thank you, Mayor. So this is an item that staff brought to Council Committee for review and discussion. We have various intersections throughout town where we experience motor vehicle blockage from time to time. Obviously, that can create unsafe conditions. And we've proposed this ordinance in order really to help generate awareness on the part of the traveling public. And this is enabling legislation. This is an ordinance we would adopt and utilize the fines that are codified under state statute. And there are 4 intersections that we've included as part of the proposed ordinance. We covered these at public hearing. I could list them all if you'd like, Mayor, but we're seeking the council's support of this item. I thought we had a good discussion during the public hearing earlier this evening. We fielded several questions that council members had. We also agreed at a staff level, if the council chooses to endorse the ordinance, we will conduct a community education campaign. We'll notify members of the public that the council's adopted this ordinance, what it means, what the fines are, and we'll work with our police department to start off with a warning procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any comment, Mr. Sweeney?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the ordinance. I just think that there are places on here where we can just avoid the entire thing in general, where if there is a section where it is unsafe for someone to take a left-hand turn, then we shouldn't allow for people to take left-hand turns there. We don't need to kind of do this. I think we do that in other places in town where we actually, right across the street from 470 New Park Avenue at the Cumberland Farms, you can only turn right out of that parking lot onto New Park. So it would make sense that we do the same thing on the other side. Things of that nature that just kind of make sense. And I think that this is a great public safety situation, as Mr. Dadoff spoke to. But I think while we're doing this, can we also just look at maybe there are some of these spots that we just don't need to take left-hand turns out of? And I would specifically mention the one on Farmington Avenue. That is just a nuisance in the sense I understand that there's a bank there that people may need to go left, but it's also, I think a gentleman spoke to it, do we really need to stop traffic for people to take left-hand turns when it's not even safe for them to do that? Because even if you do block the box, you're still your view is impeded upon by the westbound traffic, so therefore taking a left-hand turn is difficult. So it's just something, I don't have a problem with this at all. I just think that we could maybe think a little bit about what other things we can do to prevent accidents from there. And I think in some of these cases, just turning left is just not safe, and particularly on New Park and Farmington Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. As Mr. Martin says, you can, although you may be able to turn left, should you turn left in some of those situations. So Mr. Barnes, did you want to say something?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Just quickly, just to recap what we had talked about, I think we've covered it. I agree with Mr. Sweeney's comments, and also appreciate Mr. Davidoff's comments that, focusing on the intent here isn't to, wait to hand out tickets to catch people. There's certainly, I support the ordinance. There are reasons, safety reasons to have these boxes. I think it may take some time for our residents to kind of figure out what they're supposed to do there. So I do appreciate kind of the public education that's going to go along with it, and also the warning, because I think some residents, if they were to be caught in a box and receive a $117 ticket for being there, I think it would be a surprise. Certainly they would be unhappy. So I think to make sure people understand, what the penalty is, for being in that box, I think is important. And to keep that in mind as we, roll this out and enforce it how, as we see fit. And I think your title is traffic cop authority or whatever it is. That
Legal traffic authority.
Legal traffic authority. Congratulations on that title. That, you'll balance, all of the interests and take into consideration Mr. Sweeney's comments, where in some instances maybe a box isn't entirely appropriate, where you could just have a dedicated, right turn lane out of there. And, just, keep evaluating it. But I do support it, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney.
Is this a way that we can just have something on the record saying that we're going to look into those situations? Because if we can prevent accidents from happening, that would be ideal, obviously. And I think I understand for the Bank of America spot, that's probably like a big deal for them to have people turn left out of it. But if people are getting, deboned there. It doesn't make much sense to continue to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mr. Hart?
Thank you, Mayor. We do evaluate those type of restrictions on a regular basis, and I'd like to take this opportunity, if I could, to invite Mr. Martin to come forward and just speak briefly to how we review those concerns, how we make the evaluation, on what type of periodic basis, et cetera.
So normally what happens is it's through the review process. So an application comes in to develop or redevelop a site. We have known traffic conditions, or sometimes they'll do a traffic impact study and look at the crashes and propose turning movements, and then town staff would review and provide comment. That's a very common analysis and review procedure that my office does, including, there's even one on New Park Ave that's being discussed that I had concerns about, left turns in and out of the site. So that's the easiest opportunity to, right from the get-go, get the turning movements restricted. After the fact, it's a little bit challenging, and we run into that in some areas when, because of new development or changes in traffic patterns, sometimes it's temporary, short-term, long-term, whatever, but it may be unexpected and not foreseen when the development or redevelopment was being approved, and now we have a situation that could be deemed unsafe. What do you do? So the opportunity would be to go back to the property owner that has that driveway and see if they would be willing to modify it to restrict movements. And sometimes that's a challenge. They may not agree with it. Sometimes it's just the peak hours during the day that are the most challenging for maneuvers in and out, whereas the rest of the day it's not a problem. I've consulted with Pat on this to see what happens after the fact. The discussion was more for the Bishop's Corner area, where we have a lot of traffic and a lot of driveways, and despite signalized intersections nearby, people still decide to turn left in or out of a driveway that's unsignalized, which can be challenging, or we go straight across North Main Street, as an example, worst case scenario. And so there would be a loss to the property owner if you're modifying their driveway. And I don't know exactly, I'm not in a position to quantify what that loss would be, financial loss or impact, but it could involve some sort of a payment. I don't know if I can rely on Pat to explain better than I'm doing, probably, from a legality standpoint, but that's how I understand it.
So I didn't hear that we have a formal process for this.
So we
don't.
again, just to recap, we evaluate at the time an application comes in, when a property is being modified. On a complaint basis, we'll conduct evaluations as well when we're conducting an upgrade or an improvement project. So there are various opportunities in which we evaluate these type of restrictions. If the council's interested in a more comprehensive and global approach to it, we can give some thought as to how that could be done and discuss it at committee level.
Mr. Lair?
Just looking at the list of the 4 locations that are currently in the ordinance, Mr. Sweeney, I think the one that you've been talking about is the one on New Park Avenue at the Fast Track busway station.
Right.
I think the answer that Mr. Martin gave ties into that location in a very unique way and explains why we have this. That's one where the state doesn't have to come to us for approval. We can't prohibit left turns out of their property because we can't prohibit them from doing anything on their property. So that's one where all we can do is control the road, not the intersection. We can ask them, but if they say no, then we're stuck dealing with the box in our roadway outside their property. The other 3 are all properties that have, or intersections, that have been in place for longer than we've had codes of ordinances. We're looking at properties and intersections that have been around for many decades. So we're dealing with situations that have developed over the years, and we can look at no left turn kinds of things as those property owners come back to us for future applications, and I'm sure we will. I'm sure Dwayne will, if there's a site plan application that comes in for one of those properties. But in between those, this is really what we have as an alternative to work with.
So if we were to have an incident or an area that has a high density of accidents, how would we then go back to, I mean, like, you'd come to us and let us know if we have, this area has a, propensity for it. And I think, I remember talking to folks on, was it Boulevard and at end of Whiting Lane, but they were fighting for a stop sign there forever. And that took a process because the stop signs require, I think it was a light they were looking for that requires a state. But I guess what is the process of, what we're creating these spaces and then, having other outcomes that are based on that because of the intense traffic that is there. What do you do to deal with places that do just have high propensities for accidents? And I think you kind of alluded to that when asking for these spots, that these areas do have high propensities for accidents going left, right?
Yes, yeah, generally speaking.
So why wouldn't we just figure out a way to not have them turn left?
Well,
without directly working with the property owner. I guess in regards to public safety, it seems like a more of a long-term better solution to talk to the property owner before not before checking it off as something we can't do. I'm not trying to make a mountain out of molehill, but this seems like something we gotta think about long-term because the center's not getting any less congested.
Well, I think the only one with respect to a property owner would be the one for Bank of America.
Yep.
Because the one on New Park is the state, that's the fast track station. The one on
And that's something but to your point, Mr. earlier, we could ask them about that, right?
You can ask.
The one on Raymond Road was our police and fire department. They asked for that for obvious reasons.
Yep.
And then what was the other one? Oh, Farmington and Everett, which is a town a state roadway with a town intersection, town side street. So that was specifically requested out of safety concerns by the Buena Vista neighborhood. My staff reviewed it and recognized that it could benefit from a left turn lane and to do not block the box. We had the state review it because it's their highway, and they considered it worthy, and so that's why we're pursuing that.
All right.
So I think to boil it down, the one that you're most concerned about with respect to a property owner would be the Bank of America, followed second by the state on New Park Ave.
Yeah.
So we could pursue both of those. As far as the Bank of America, I think it may be challenged by the bank, but we could start the conversation.
Well, it might be helpful to, again, bring this to a committee, whether it's community plan or public safety. I mean, I think town manager can think about that, and look at maybe the accident report and have an understanding of what really is happening at those intersections.
Okay.
And then maybe a further discussion after a committee has an opportunity to hear about that. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, good plan there. We'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Oh, I'm sorry, that's a roll call. You're right. I apologize. Roll call, Ms. LeBron.
Mr. Barnes?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Mr. Dodge is absent, Ms. Fay is absent, Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams is absent. This passes.
Thank you, Ms. LeBron. No new business. Number 7, reports from the town manager, Mr. Hart. What? That was B, yeah. I know, it was a long
Need new
time.
glasses.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. So my report's loaded up in board docs here. A few items I would like to touch on. First, under council business, the Community Planning and Physical Services Committee will meet tomorrow at 8 a.m. in room 312. The main item for discussion will be the proposed sponsorship signage ordinance. Recall, we talked about that last fall. TPZ had expressed some concerns. I withdrew it at the public hearing. We've invited members of the TPZ and our Youth Sports League representatives to tomorrow's meeting. So that will be the primary item for discussion. Public Safety Committee will meet the following day, Thursday the 18th at 8 a.m. in room 312. We'll receive a report from the police chief, but then spend the bulk of the meeting talking about a section of the fire department study. And as the committee agreed to at its last meeting, we're going to be reviewing. We received the study, had a good presentation from the consultants, but now we're going to be discussing it in more detail, section by section. So Chief Priest will take the lead this coming Thursday. Finance and Budget Committee will meet next week, Wednesday, the 24th. Human Services Committee not meeting this month. We'll pick up the schedule soon. And our next regular council meeting with the summer schedule we will hold at August 13th at 6:30 p.m. here in this room. Moving on to staff reports, the Park Road I-84 project. We are making good progress now. The project is now in phase 5 out of 7 phases overall. This phase, along with the last phase, is somewhat more disruptive because the work zone does extend, as you know, through the intersection of Trout Brook Drive, and that will remain in effect for the next couple of weeks. So we do have detours in place. We appreciate the cooperation from the members of the public, and you know, in a matter of weeks, we will be able to reopen that section. The project itself should be finished later this fall. Moving on, I've got some really good news to share with you. Recall, we've been talking over the last couple of meetings about funding restrictions for the North Main Street Bridge project. Well, the DOT did notify us just the other day that the state funding has been restored. It has been restored for this project. It's a very important project for us, as you know, not just to the town of West Hartford, but also the region. Approximately 20,000 cars a day travel across that bridge. It was constructed in 1901, and it's really in need of repair. So I would like to thank and acknowledge the members of our state delegation, in particular, State Representative Joe Varengia, with a special assist from Jonathan Harris, former Undersecretary at OPM, recently appointed a senior advisor to the governor, for their assistance. They did great work in restoring the state funding for this important project, and we're looking to commence the work this fall. In addition, we'll be able to begin work on the Brayburn Road Bridge next month, August. As we get closer to the start of the school year, we'll communicate with the staff at Brayburn School to make sure that the school community is notified with respect to any detours, etc. Moving on, making very good progress on various capital projects. The summer is always a very busy time for us, especially for capital projects at the schools. I've got a list of several here. You can read at your convenience. Weather. So we're about to experience some excessive heat and humidity, and we expect the state will issue an excessive heat warning this Friday through Monday, the 22nd. So the town, we're engaged in a public relations, public communication effort just to notify people of critical steps that they can take during these heat advisories, and really encourage people to keep an eye out to the extent possible on their neighbors, especially folks who are more frail, seniors, etc. We have many town facilities that are open. If people are in need of a cooling center, if you will, they can come to our libraries, our senior centers. Our pools will be open. West Farms Mall is also always a good location. Moving on, I wanted to touch on a couple of promotions. First, I'm very pleased to announce that we have promoted engineer Greg Summer. Greg has been before the council quite recently. He's been promoted to the position of assistant town engineer. We carried that position for many, many years, and it was vacant more recently. And with the council support, which we appreciate, we were able to restore it in this year's this year's operating budget. So Greg will be responsible for a variety of tasks in engineering, and I think he'll do a very good job in that role. And then Lisa Newton, I don't know if folks know Lisa. She has worked for the last several years for the school district. She had worked for the town previously. She has been appointed as our financial operations manager. She will be succeeding Liz Hewitt in that position. Liz is taking the school business manager position at the Board of Education. So Lisa has worked for either the town or the Board of Ed for many, many years. She's very well qualified. She's a CPA. She's quite familiar with our department. We have a very good working relationship between the school's finance office and our finance office, and I think she will prove a great fit. Two other things I want to report on. Just earlier this evening, the council issued a farewell or a proclamation in honor of retiring Assistant Police Chief Robert T. McHugh. Chief McHugh has had a fabulous career with the town, as we noted earlier this evening. 39 years, that shows extreme dedication. And he has served in so many roles in the department, starting off as a police officer, worked in the detective bureau, worked as a sergeant, and served as one of our two assistant chiefs since 1996, which really is a fabulous career. And I want to thank and acknowledge the chief for the support he's lent to me. You know, in my first 2 years here in this position, his institutional knowledge and memory is just fabulous. Any task or any assignment we've requested of him, his work ethic is tremendous. He's a true producer. Great team player. We're going to miss him, but I know he's not going to be a stranger. So look forward to recognizing him tomorrow night as well at a retirement party that his family is throwing in his honor. Council members, you have been invited if you haven't had a chance to see that email. If you are available tomorrow night, we'd love to see you. And then last, but certainly not least, I wanted to touch on Ideanomics, the proposed FinTech project that we've been following over the past several months. Later this week, on July 19th, 1 p.m., I believe, at the St. Joseph's campus, Ideanomics will be unveiling its plans for the project, conducting a media event. They are reaching out to abutters of the project. This week, they're going door to door as part of a public education campaign. Council, as you know, given your land use role, this would not be an event this on Friday that you should attend. You know, I know you're well aware of that. Mark McGovern, our Director of Community Development, will attend as the town's representative. So progress with that project. The applicant, Ideanomics, they have submitted applications to demolish several of the buildings on campus. We expect one more application to come. Our demolition ordinance does require a 90-day delay period. That 90-day clock begins the day the application is filed. And we received applications for 3 of the 4 buildings that they plan to demolish last week. So much more information to come. As a staff, we're very respectful of your land use approval role. We'll keep you up to date as best we can. And Corporation Counsel, Mr. Allaire, within the last week or so, had sent an email to you providing good guidance as to how you should review matters relating to the application before you officially receive it. That completes my report, Mayor. I know it's a little bit longer than usual. Had a number of items I wanted to touch on. Happy to take any questions councilors may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Are there questions for the town manager? Mr. Barnes?
Just one follow-up question on the last topic that we were talking about, the former Yukon property and Ideanomics. You know, it's been before the council for a number of years in various, forms, but we are aware that there are some environmental concerns on the property. It's been reported in the press. I was just wondering if you could just provide an update of, if where the remediation efforts stand and when, if we know, they'll be completed.
I can only give you an approximate time frame at this point. So the primary contaminant on the property, I think the council is very familiar with it, but folks who may be listening in, PCBs, and those are very common contaminant for institutional buildings of this era. And PCBs, that's a chemical material that made the caulk that was used in those buildings pliable. At the time it was used, no one knew that it was a carcinogen that was identified after the fact. Anyhow, PCBs will eventually leach out of the material, typically into the ground and sometimes into the building materials as well. Ideanomics, as part of their evaluation, they determined that the contaminant levels were such that it made sense to demolish and build new buildings, as opposed to just trying to abate and renovate the existing buildings. So they are beginning abatement work very soon, because they can do some abatement work focused on the buildings while their demolition permits are pending. So I suspect they'll be able to complete a lot of that work in the immediate vicinity of the buildings over the next couple of months. The larger scale remediation, looking at grounds a little bit further out from the buildings, will take more time. I expect that will play out over the next year or so.
Okay. So the remediation of the property you think will take, or you're understanding that it could take upwards of a year to complete?
Let me get back to you with a more specific time frame. I'm trying to be conservative in my estimates there. It's work that they will need to complete prior to commencing construction.
Okay. So people around town, and particularly in that neighborhood, will expect to start to see some remediation activity on the property, in the coming months.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Actually, probably in coming weeks.
Coming weeks. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes.
If I could just follow up, the only other thing I'd mention is, I believe that for some of the demolition work, they'll need to get wetlands permits. So, because of the proximity to the brooks, so that time frame for getting the permit needs to be factored into when they can start doing some of that work that the public might see. It may take a couple of months for that process to play out.
Thank you, Mr. Allaire. Anybody else? Okay. We'll go to announcements. Start with the Playhouse on Park presents the Scottsboro Boys now through August 4th. Tickets range from $40 to $50. I have heard great things about this show. It's been written up actually a couple of times, and I am going tomorrow night. So call the box office, Playhouse on Park, or go to their website, playhouseonpark.org. Merry Wives of Windsor Capitol Classics presents the Merry Wives of Windsor, held outside on the campus of University of St. Joseph's now through July 28th. And you can go to capitolclassics.org/onstage for tickets. The senior picnic will take place tomorrow. It's the West Hartford Police Officers Association will be grilling hamburgers and hot dogs. From 12 to 2:30, entertainment provided by the Troubadours. Tickets are limited to 200 people on a first-come, first-served basis, and please call 860-561-7583 for tickets. Taste of Blueback Square will be held on Wednesday, July 31st on Isham Road from 5:30 to 8:30. An evening of food sampling from Blueback Square and the Center restaurants. Tickets are $40 for general admission and $50 for VIP. Go to bluebacksquare.com/events for tickets. Anybody else have any announcements? No? Okay. With that, we will go to appointments. Oh, no. Reports from Corporation Counsel. Mr. Allaire.
I have no formal report, and we don't need an executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Allaire. Any questions for Corporation Counsel? Okay. Now we're up to appointments. I move that we appoint Judy Casperson as Town Council Zoning Alternate with the term ending 12/31/2021.
Second.
Motion's been made and
Seriously,
seconded.
Judy? No, I'm kidding. Bring it
Motion's
back.
been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. And then everything else is on consent.
Just
No,
kidding,
13
Judy, if you're watching.
She is.
Just kidding.
She's outside now. 13 consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. No petitions, no executive session. I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Good night.